You're watching NASA TV.
Good day from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room as you are looking live at the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. Inside, two Roscosmos cosmonauts, Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin. They are suited up in their Orlan spacesuits, ready to begin a 6-hour, 50-minute spacewalk to retrieve and discard old scientific equipment that has been on the outside of the Zvezda service module for a number of years, and to install new data transmission radio hardware for high-speed data and telemetry capability from the Russian segment of the International Outpost.
Russian Spacewalk 59 will be conducted by Sergei Prokopyev, EV1 in the red stripes, and Dmitry Petelin, EV2 in the blue stripes. To start the spacewalk, crew will egress the Poisk airlock with a cable carrier bundle and a data transmission radio monoblock. After egress, they'll activate the Orlan sublimators, turn on the helmet video and lights, then begin translation to the Zvezda module. After arriving at the first Zvezda patch panel, the crew will open a multi-insulation layer flap and mate a connector from the cable bundle to the panel. They'll take closeout photos, reinstall the flap, and begin routing the newly installed cable to the zenith side of the module. Once the crew completes the second cable mate, Dmitry will retrieve the stowed radio monoblock and follow Sergei down to the next work site, continuing to route the cable as they go. Once Sergei and Dmitry arrive at the Port Zvezda module worksite, they'll work to remove two existing monoblocks, a seismoprognos payload, and a high-speed data transmission system. To do this, they'll release the connectors and locks. Sergei will then proceed to jettison both items. After jettison, they'll release a final TMTC monoblock that Sergei will stow on his suit, while Dmitry proceeds to install the new data transmission radio via structural locks, 4 connectors, and the release of 2 protective shrouds. Sergei will then take the TMTC monoblock and jettison the unit in the station aft direction. Both crew will proceed further aft along the Zvezda module, where they'll remove a science experiment and take imagery of the plume deflectors. Sergei will then translate to the aft face of the module and retrieve a cassette container. Meanwhile, Dmitry will proceed with imagery of an antenna boom interface. The crew will then meet back up and begin translation, station forward, back to the Poisk airlock. They'll stow the remaining hardware from the Zvezda module tasks and continue to the final worksite of the day at the top of the Poisk module. Here, they'll have a short task to retrieve a biorisk payload before continuing back to the airlock. After inspecting each other's suits, the crew will ingress and close the hatch, ending Russian Spacewalk 59.
The cosmonauts beginning to emerge from the Poisk airlock.
Wow, that's
Again, the official start time of today's spacewalk was 9:24 a.m. Central Time, 10:24 a.m. Eastern Time. And you can see the first of the two cosmonauts outside of the Poisk airlock, which is located on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. This is Mission Control Houston, 17 and a half minutes into what is expected to be about a 6-hour, 50-minute spacewalk today. Dmitry Petelin and Sergei Prokopyev both outside of the Poisk airlock as they set up equipment before making their way back to the Zvezda service module at the rear of the Russian segment of the International Space Station to begin their work that will start with the removal of science experiments and stanchions upon which other equipment have been mounted, and the jettisoning of those items that will be aft of the Russian segment, well out of the way of the space station with no chance for recontacting the complex.
Okay, I have it.
Так, готов стыковать, разъем, КФП-7.
I'm ready to make the connector HFP7-9.
Вступай к стыковке.
Yes, you have a check in the labeling, and it is correct.
Принято.
HFP
Номер кабеля.
7-9.
Разъем.
Connector is secured.
Номер кабеля получится.
Copy.
Да, пойдешь. Да, все зафиксировал. Ага, да, вижу.
All right, I have it secured.
Принято.
Copy.
The connector work that is ongoing by Prokopyev and Petelin will be the precursor to the installation of a new high-speed data transmission radio hardware on the Zvezda service module a bit later in today's spacewalk. This new data transmission hardware will replace an older system, providing a much more efficient data and telemetry capability for work ongoing in the Russian segment of the station. Hour mark into today's spacewalk, continuing to work with a series of cable connectors for the upcoming installation of a high-speed data transmission system. This is just part of the work to remove and jettison equipment no longer needed, scientific equipment no longer needed on the outside of the Zvezda service module, and the installation of new hardware for high-speed data transmission, as well as the extensive collection of photography of the external surfaces of the service module for engineering analysis on the ground.
Confirm the removal. Maybe you can take some rest for now.
Хорошо.
before you proceed with demating. Will do.
По твоей готовности можно расстыковывать СЛПИ разъемы.
And you may start on demating connectors on SVPE monoblock when you are ready.
It's free.
Принято.
Copy.
Отталкивай.
And jettisoning.
And there it goes.
It was a good, trusty...
Our ballistics officer here in Mission Control reports it was jettisoned in a good trajectory, well away from the station. No chance for recontact with the complex. So the seismic experiment that has spent almost a decade on the International Space Station is now on its own to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere.
Так, страхуй.
All right.
Или за тебя застраховать вопрос?
Securing it.
Давай я кину. Давай.
Or do you want to do that? Well, I can do that.
И отталкивай.
And jettisoning.
Following the jettisoning of the seismic experiment, Prokopyev now has jettisoned the monoblock or stanchion upon which it and telemetry equipment were mounted on.
It's kind of...
3, 4.
And there is the third of the 3 jettisons planned during the spacewalk. The telemetry monoblock on its way. That concludes the jettison portion of today's spacewalk by Prokopyev and Petelin. He's waving goodbye to that item. As it fades from view, it will burn up in the Earth's atmosphere, posing no chance for recontact to the International Space Station. This view of Dmitry Petelin in the 5th spacewalk of his career, Sergei Prokopyev well into the 7th spacewalk in his career.
Will do.
Artyom, shall we leave for log bag? Okay, I'm taking it. Yes, leave the crew log bag. Copy.
A good view of Dmitry Petelin working near the aft end of the Zvezda service module, 3 hours 18 minutes into today's spacewalk. The 2 cosmonauts.
And then please take a video of everything around the F-shaped handrails. And Dima, you'll be working on UKP at that time.
And 3-5 centimeters, so it's just fine. And there are plenty of handrails here, and there shouldn't be any issues with them. And you want us to use the wrench to tighten it, right? Yes, please.
I removed the caps.
Есть фиксация.
I confirm it has been attached.
Okay, sounds good.
After conducting their photographic documentation of these plume deflectors on the thrusters of the Zvezda service module, the two cosmonauts will be removing one tray of experiments from what is called the impact space experiment that has measured micrometeoroid debris hits on the Russian segment of the station for a number of years. They will also be removing one of the containers from what is known as the SKK, or cassette container, from the service module
And
that has contained material science samples collecting data over a number of years.
Putting using glycer. Oh, that will. Well, we're not going to take the video of the rest of the parts of the edge. What you have not taken a video of. So along plane 4 until number 1.
The instructions from Russian flight controllers to Prokopyev and Petelin as they wrap up the documentation of the antenna boom upon which the Lyra high-gain transmission and telemetry antenna resides at the aft end of the Zvezda service module. That documentation has now been completed, and the two cosmonauts will start to make their way back from the aft end of the service module toward the forward end of the service module in the Russian segment of the space station, carrying the materials science cassette container and the impact experiment sample container back to the Poisk airlock with them. We're 4 hours, 13 minutes into today's spacewalk. Everything has gone ahead of the timeline, with all of the objectives so far having been accomplished.
Dima, did you copy? Well, when I touch the metal parts, unintelligible. To the center, unintelligible.
Принято. Ну, то есть надо... Можно еще этим еще раз пройти?
All right, can you go over it one more time? Boots are, the legs are clean. The backpack, I think it's cleanish. Not too bad. All good. All right.
Сергей, надо плотнее прижимать.
Sergey, press harder. You actually need to put some effort.
Лучше глиссер зафиксируем на пульте.
Secure the glue.
Sergei Prokopyev now cleaning one of the windows on the Zvezda service module. Inside, fellow cosmonaut Andrei Fedyayev recording those activities from the inside out.
All right.
So we're going to do that as much as possible.
And a good view of the Expedition 69 commander, Sergei Prokopyev, in the home stretch of the 7th spacewalk of his career.
Yes. It's on my gloves.
Дима, давай свежим полотенцем вытришь руки.
Could you use a fresh towel, please, and clean number 3? Yes, would be great if you use a fresh towel. Okay, I'm jettisoning it. Alright, went well. Copy. The towel is gone.
And the bundle of 2 towels has been jettisoned. The 4th item to be jettisoned during today's spacewalk